With us is Marc Fisher, who is the senior editor of the Washington Post. He reports and writes on a wide range of topics, including having served as their enterprise editor for 2 years, blogging for them. He wrote a book called Something in the Air, Radio Rock and the Revolution That Shaped a Generation. We'll have to talk about that some point too, Marc. But Marc is here to talk to us about his reporting on debt collection and Social Security. Marc, thanks so much for joining us.
Great to be with you.
Listen, you wrote a story that got a lot of attention and a little bit of action too. I would say quite a bit of results. Can you tell us a little bit about your story on the debt collection in Social Security?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a story that developed when I got a tip about people who had their tax refunds confiscated by the U.S. government. These are people who filed their taxes a little bit early this year. They were expecting their refund in the mail, and instead they get a letter from the government, from Treasury Department, saying that they have intercepted your tax refund to pay off an old debt. Now, in every case that I ended up speaking to dozens of people who have had this experience, and it turns out that Social Security had overpaid a lot of folks over the years, often small amounts, sometimes a few $100s, sometimes a few thousand, and now, because of a one-sentence change in the law, lifting the statute of limitations, they could go after these really old debts. So these people who had their tax refunds taken never knew they had these debts. In fact, in many cases, the debts belong not to them, but to their parents, who have long since died. And the government is now coming after the kids of these deceased people and trying to get repayment of debts that no one in the family ever knew existed.
So you have a situation here where, for example, I might be counting on a tax refund to, fix something in the house or just get by, and all of a sudden it's taken from me, and they're saying because literally in 1961 they believe they overpaid one of my parents or some other family member. Now they're penalizing me $2,500 or whatever the amount might be, and I have essentially, if I understand your story correctly, in these situations I would have had no recourse.
Yeah,
nothing I can do.
No, you have no recourse. You have no notice. The government is required to give you notice of a debt before they take your money, either by confiscating your tax refund or maybe garnishing your wages. But in many of these cases, the way the government went about sending out notice was to send a letter to the address of the family 40 years ago. And so those bounced back, of course, because not a lot of people live where their parents lived 40 years ago. And so these folks never got any notice until their tax refund was taken from them. And there's very little recourse here. There is an appeals process, but the government makes the decision, and they choose to decide on the government's behalf 90% of the time. So these folks were out a lot of money in some cases, and all told, Social Security went after 400,000 of these old debts to the tune of about $700 million just in the last year or so. So this is a pretty widespread phenomenon, or was until our story was published, and 4 days later we got the government to roll this back.